I mean, I don't necessarily know what makes it so taboo, other than I just, I do believe that like sex and then sexuality, I think we were created for that to be the highest level of intimacy between humans. And so in my nature, I'm I'm going to understand just biologically that if I'm doing an unhealthy version of that, whether it's porn or having affairs or whatever that looks like, on some level, I know there's depravity there. I know this is not what I was created to do. This is not what was meant to be. And so that shame, I think in a lot of ways, the shame from speaking for myself, sexual depravity, sexual addiction, is some of the greatest shame that a human can have.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to Neff Inspiration, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stephan, Neff. Another fantastic day to have an interview. And I've got Logan Hufford with me. Logan is an amazing man who is showing all the beautiful features of someone who has gone through the darkness and is now in the light, and is helping others to see the light. The humility, the authenticity, the integrity, all those things. Now, none of us are a holy man. There is no halo circling over him or over me, but we are on our journey to try to be the best humans that we possibly can. And therefore, I can't wait to speak to Logan about his addiction. And it is high time that we shed light on indeed sexual addiction in all its shape and colors. That's probably one of the last taboos. People are quite happy to talk about their alcohol, maybe less happy to talk about their drugs. But when it comes to sex, yeah, okay. There's this little cicada in the background where no one is really speaking up. Here you go, Logan. I'm very, very grateful that you are a guest on my show. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Stephan. I'm really happy to be here.
It's so bizarre. If we accept that 12% of the whole internet is porn, and that, I don't know what the figures are nowadays, but I don't know how many men right now, and women right now, are watching porn as we speak. It must be hundreds of thousands, literally. Yet it is still such a taboo to speak of. Why do you think that is?
Why is it taboo? Why? I mean, it's a couple different things. It's taboo, and yet it's also completely minimized at the same time, which is, and so it's like, it oscillates, I think, between, I feel such shame, I feel so bad, and yet I can also feel like, well, everyone does it. It's okay. My buddies do it. And I can live in both those camps, and both of those camps are wrong and unhealthy. But I've spent time in both those camps. I mean, I don't necessarily know what makes it so taboo, other than I just, I do believe that like sex and then sexuality, I think we were created for that to be the highest level of intimacy between humans. And so the unhealthy version of that, I think in my nature, I'm going to understand just biologically that if I'm doing an unhealthy version of that, whether it's porn or having affairs or whatever that looks like, on some level, I know there's depravity there. I know this is not what I was created to do. This is not what was meant to be. And so that shame, I think in a lot of ways, the shame from speaking for myself, sexual depravity, sexual addiction, is some of the greatest shame that a human can have.
And that makes sense, actually, when you look at the deep rooted desire of pleasure, and in truly, I mean, what more pleasure can there be than being with another human in a beautiful sexual relationship? So it's a very wise point that you just pointed out there. So we're talking about the depth of the how deeply down rooted the issues are. Wisely spoken. But when we talk about sexual addiction, that can take any shape or form, can't it? And it is the most common one will probably be pornography, but I mean, there's a spectrum of things. I'm so grateful that you're authentic and humble enough to actually spell it out. I mean, how did it all start with you?
So for me, it started out with looking at pictures that were available to me, which was relatively modest and conservative compared to where it got and compared to what's accessible nowadays to the average kid, the average human. When I was about 9 years old, I grew up in a very safe and loving and stable home. There were no Playboys laying around. There was no porn easily accessible. I mean, this is, I'm younger than some, older than some, but this was dial-up internet and VHS tapes, kind of thing. I mean, this was not something where I had a smartphone or an iPad laying around. So late 90s, and I didn't know how sex worked. I didn't know what masturbation was, but I remember the first time I found the lingerie and underwear section of a JCPenney catalog. And I started flipping through that, and I'm like, I like what I'm seeing, and I like how it makes me feel. I didn't realize on anything about how the biology worked of what the chemistry of my brain and the dopamine hits and all this, and yet all of that was happening. And so from that age, again, before I even knew what to do with myself physically, I knew I liked it. I knew that I was getting a hit. And that graduated fairly quickly to then, okay, I suppose I could find this stuff on the internet. And again, I didn't have a lot of opportunity to do that. But when I could, I would sneak upstairs to the family computer and look at pictures there. And it started with still photos only, no videos. And I specifically was looking for what I had trained my brain to enjoy at that point, which was lingerie and underwear. That was what I wanted. And I remember the first time, it's always been a distinctive memory, the first time a naked woman came across the screen, I actually immediately went past it, and I was revolted. I was like, oh, because I'd never seen that before. And like that was, I had not trained my brain yet to see that as beautiful. That was weird. And so the progression of my addiction, it was only like a little seedling at that point. And very quickly, I then trained myself to see that as something attractive and see that as something that I want to chase after. And once I did that, then it got to hardcore videos and was introduced to masturbation. And then it was like, okay, well, I've unlocked this way to enjoy all of this. And of course, so now I'm just gluing myself to all of this even more. I'm training myself even more. And it stayed, not literally internal, but it stayed basically within myself and my behaviors like that for a while. I was always very shy. I was always very insecure and felt like I was ugly and girls wouldn't like me. So I was nervous to approach girls. And it wasn't until several years after that, after high school, when I was 18 years old, and I had what I call my prodigal son moment, where I first started experimenting with partying and sexually and drinking and mixing all three of those things. And that was one level. And then I met a young woman who started dating, and then it turned into infatuation, where porn went down quite a bit, but it was still there. It just went down quite a bit. But then I cheated on her for the first time. And once that dam broke, and I had taught myself to start doing that, that was the greatest rush I had ever got. And then I still was doing all the other things, porn and flirting and all these, but now I had started cheating and started chasing after that high. And then I just became a full-on sociopathic, manipulative predator, essentially, just chasing after whatever I could squeeze out of any female in my path. And that went on for years until 2016.
Wow. Beautifully described your crescendo there, your growth into this addiction. Let's call it what it was in your case. Having said that, what did a new relationship or what did a new sexual encounter give you?
it gave me the high of attention, the high of being wanted, being sought after.
Exactly.
I have some sort of value to this person.
Mm.
And on a more unhealthy, more depraved level, it gave me a feeling of power and control. I now have influence over this person. You know, when I could be talking to a young lady and she would, you know, break plans that she had to come hang out with me, boom, that's a hit. Because now I have, in my mind, I have power over her.
Okay.
When I would have affairs, sometimes they were with single women. But if they were married, if they were in a relationship, that was an extra. And I mean, these are terrible things, and I'm speaking about them, you know, almost nonchalantly. It's not to minimize them at all, but you know, I try to look at this from a very clinical angle of like, yeah, this is what it was, and so, you know, when I would get a married woman or a woman in a relationship, you know, to have an affair with me, that was an extra level of an extra high, because that's, in my mind, that's more power and more control that I have. And I just, I mean, I'm a big believer in the fact that every choice I make is training my brain and training my body that choice is good for me. Like everything I do is training my brain on some level. And so I was continually and constantly training my brain and training my body that it's good to flirt, and it's good to chase after these things. It's good to do these things because I like it. And I just got myself in this vicious cycle of chasing after all of this stuff and just wreaking havoc all around me.
That's a tricky one, isn't it? Because how long, may I ask, how long did such an affair typically last?
So usually they were, I mean, not literally at night, but essentially one night stands. I mean, they were
one-night
hookups.
Stands, okay.
And I'll be honest, I don't like using verbiage like hookups, because I do feel like some of that verbiage is just very minimizing of what it was. But yeah, they were one-time sexual affairs usually.
Sure.
I was a car. Oh, go ahead.
No. See, that's the interesting one, because there are a lot of arguments there, one way or the other, because it takes two to tango. Okay, so obviously you were fulfilling the needs of the other person as well. So therefore, to call yourself a predator, I would rather use that word if you were to use violence against other women, or would use really severe manipulation in order, blackmail to get them into bed or something like that. That would fit far more my thoughts of a predator, whilst you were trying to fulfill your needs.
Well,
you could argue that these needs were extreme and were a thing, but you didn't force anyone. So therefore, your counterpart, yeah, there is a good reason that she went to bed with you, isn't it?
Well, so there's a couple of reasons why I use the term predator, and I do use it very intentionally. And I realize, you know, the word predator, especially when we're talking of the sexual nature, that has very specific connotations, and I recognize that. And so it's, you know, from a legal perspective, no, I wasn't. But the reason why I choose the word predators is kind of twofold. So number one, in most cases, I was extremely manipulative and very deceptive on different levels. I would take off my wedding ring sometimes not.
Okay.
So, you know, a lot of these women didn't know that I was married, or at first, when I first started cheating, I wasn't married yet, but I was engaged. You know, it's like, so a lot of those women didn't know that. So right then and there, I think I can call myself a predator, because I was not being at all honest about what this was, what I was, what they were getting themselves into. And then even if a woman knew that I was married, knew that I had a family, you know, in some ways, I might say they were little ways, but all along the way of grooming the situation, grooming them, grooming the environment. I'm not being honest about the fact that, hey, I want to use you for a one-time sexual high, and then after that, peace out.
That cool.
You know, I was not going to be honest about that kind of thing. So that's for me. That's why. I mean, and part of it also is just extreme ownership. I need, in my opinion, I need to own the fact that there was nothing there's nothing to glorify here. There's nothing sexy about it. It's like, no, I was a scumbag.
Okay, no, and I love that. I love that. And the extreme ownership that you're practicing there, I love that. Absolutely love that. Jocko Willink, one of my heroes. So extreme ownership, good book, good principle. I like it, and therefore I very much respect that. It's intriguing though to see the flow-on effects, and I think the reality was that addiction means that you actually keep doing things despite the fact that there are negative consequences or that you end up in trouble. And needless to say, I mean, did your affairs come out? What happened? I mean, did women meet themselves, meet each other by accident? You know, these kind of things happen. What were the flow-on effects for you?
Right. And that's part of it too, is, I've shared some of the examples of like the high that I would get and why I was chasing after these things. Because yes, on a basic biological level, I enjoyed the feelings that I would get from the chase, as well as from, acquiring what I was chasing after. Exactly. And yet there was very deep self-hatred and despair this entire time. There was never a part of me that was like, oh, this is fine. This is okay. I'm not a bad guy. I knew this is terrible what I was doing. So just to speak to that, the addiction part of it, and it's like, I didn't think that this was okay. But to your question about, did the affairs come out? Did these women? So I was extremely careful, and I worked my butt off to protect my addiction, to protect myself, selfishly from all this. So like for most of this time, my wife and I, and we started having kids young. So I mean, for a lot of my addiction, I had already had kids, and I was already a dad, and we lived in Wasilla, Alaska, still do, which is an hour north of Anchorage, which is like the only relatively big city at all. It's about 250,000 people. Alaska's not huge, but we lived an hour north of there, and I never had an affair in Wasilla. I worked in Anchorage, and I would my whole double life was in Anchorage. I would go out for drinks after work in Anchorage. I would chase after women in Anchorage. All of that was in Anchorage. And part of that was practicality. I was already working in that city and everything. But I mean, also, I was extremely careful that when I'm in Wasilla, I'm dad mode, I'm husband mode. And so, those paths didn't cross. But yeah, I mean, in terms of my wife, because like I said earlier, self-hatred, despair, hating the things that I was doing, even as I continued to do them. I confessed these things to her because I felt terrible. And so a year after we got married, I wrote a letter and I confessed that I had cheated on her multiple times. And in my head, as silly as it may sound and as foolish as it was, I thought I was done. I thought that I could just toggle that switch off, and I'm just not going to do it anymore. And I continued to do that. What we call vomiting. I vomited on her. Bleh, I feel bad. Bleh, I did this, but no behavior change for a lot of years.
Intriguing. Okay. Wow. What was her response to the letter?
So that first time, she was absolutely broken, just completely in shock, completely broken and hurting, obviously. I mean, all of those words feel like an understatement because I can't describe it verbally. And so those first couple of years, she would tell you now, she responded in terms of her actions, her behavior, by basically doing all the things that a lot of women are told to do. She didn't have anyone in her ear advising her, but I'm going to be more sexually available for Logan. I'm going to be prettier for Logan. I'm going to be a better wife for Logan. I'm going to be a more loving, supportive, submissive wife for Logan so that he won't have any reason to cheat on me. She, in her mind, she thought that I was cheating on her because she wasn't good enough, which was never the case. And I realized, there's guys out there that, I cheat on my wife because she's an old nag or because she wasn't in it. I mean, whatever. I didn't do that. there was no part of me that cheated on her because she wasn't good enough. I cheated on her because I had trained myself to want new and different and exciting. So I continued to chase those things. So she responded by, she was already an incredibly loving, beautiful woman. And she tried to do more of what she already was. And that continued for several years until, thank God, she was able to have a complete shift in her mindset, which was the catalyst for change for me.
And it's those setting of boundaries and of her starting to look after herself, and that suddenly, with the kind of codependency, suddenly, if one person suddenly stands up, the other one either falls or the other one gets up as well. Bloody hell! Okay, wow. But it's such a destructive thing for a relationship. It's intriguing that she stayed by your side. But then, of course, you're talking Alaska. There's a certain kind of isolation there. There's not really there. It's a very small community. Was there a feeling of shame for her as well towards the outside world? Was it trying to hide the trouble? Was it a white picket fence imagination that was prevalent there?
Initially, absolutely. And again, I don't even have to speculate. She would tell you if she was sitting here, she, for a while, for those first several years of marriage, when she knew about the affairs, she knew that I had continually done these things. She didn't want to share it with other people because she felt like that would bring shame on me, which is like, it's mind-boggling. I mean, because I was doing all these things. I needed to feel a little shame, but she didn't want to bring shame on me, and she also felt embarrassed, on some level. Again, because she's like, well, if he's cheating on me, obviously it means I'm probably not a good enough wife, and so if people know about it, then that's going to look bad on me.
Sure.
So yeah, there definitely was in the first couple of years of marriage, especially. We got married June 4th, 2011. So, by the time I gave her that letter, there'd been multiple affairs over the course of a couple of years. And she did, request or essentially tell me, like, you've got to tell some people, shortly after that. So maybe it was like 3 years after we got married. I don't remember the date, that I told, we're both very close with our immediate families. We're all in generally the same areas. A few have moved out, but we moved out of state. So I told, like, my parents, and I told my siblings and their families. We were still actively going to church. And if we talk about double life, I mean, there'd be plenty of Sunday mornings where I'm holding my wife's hand, singing praise and worship songs, knowing what I was doing the night before, just like, what am I doing here? And so I told my pastor, and, shared this stuff with him. And like, it was good that I shared it with some people. So some people knew, but again, there wasn't any difference in my infrastructure of how I approached life. How much freedom I had, and just the routines of my daily life were still essentially the same as they'd always been. And the last thing I needed was the same amount of freedom and routines. I needed a kick in the pants. I needed people to get in my face and poke me in the gut a little bit. And again, I got that, but not until quite a bit later.
But that's where then the fact is that the opposite to addiction is connection, and connection with those people that hold you accountable, that are there for you as true friends, who can look you in the eyes and say, stop that shit. Or, do you really want to do that? Have you not seen her crying enough? Those kind of hard words that are meant actually really well. And I love it that you speak so highly of your wife. It is many relationships end up on the rocks. They end up in divorce because people are incompatible you could also say that maybe people didn't put the work into their relationship or more importantly, into themselves. So they remained broken. Their spouses remained broken. And then sooner or later there's an affair. Whilst with you, it was a very different story. And that's so important and beautiful to say. So this was not a failing relationship. It would have been, or it could have been a failing relationship, but you are taking the ownership of saying, actually, that's because of me, not because of other things. And that's so important. So this is
as crazy as it sounds, my wife and I, we did, and I'm saying we because I was part of a couple. I take ownership of my stuff, but we as a couple, me as a husband, as a fiance before that, I mean, the foundation of how we started was terrible in so many ways, and yet we've always been best friends, including Stephan, including during these times when I wrote that letter and cheating on her before we got married, and all of this time we've been best buddies, and we've loved hanging out together and just want to be with each other, which is all the more reason to point at, this was not about her. This was not about her not being good enough or me not liking her. And I thank God for that fact that we were best friends, that we have been, because it enabled us to have a heck of a foundation on which to look at, okay, because once serious change actually did start to happen, once God put people in my life and an infrastructure and a recovery program, they're like, okay, there's actually hope. I can actually do things differently. I'm so thankful that almost everything got stripped away. But the one thing that didn't, between me and my wife, Carrie, was that friendship. Now, that's tricky because that's descriptive, but that's not prescriptive, right? Not everyone in a recovery program is best friends with their spouse. Sure. But I mean, I can only speak for myself and my marriage, and I'm very thankful for that fact.
Wow, beautifully said. I mean, here you were writing letters to your wife, and you described it so beautifully that you feel, see, I made amends means I gave sort of a half-hearted apology, and that's it. Done.
That's to make me feel better.
Exactly right. Yeah. And that pattern sort of continued for a little while. What then caused the change?
2015, I'd had another affair, and again, Carrie would tell you, because she said it in her own words, that there were things about this affair that made it more painful than any other one. And so this affair happened, and after this, summer of 2015, she did something she'd never done before. She finally gave me an ultimatum. And Carrie's an extremely strong woman. She's very independent, and she does not speak rashly. So she told me, she said, if you do not get help and make serious change, I'm gone, and the boys are gone. We had 3 boys already. She was pregnant with our 4th. And so I knew she meant that, and that scared me. Because again, this wasn't, a woman that had become hardened against and didn't. I desperately did not want to lose her. I loved her, even though my actions did not show that. So that scared the crap out of me. So I started attending some meetings. I started doing some things. Now, I basically played around with recovery for about a year. And in that moment, I didn't know, the word recovery was not part of my lingo. But I went to some meetings. I would share, just like you said, just like the pattern that I'd started before with that letter, I would share enough to feel better. I would go to a meeting and I would, oh, well, I did this and I did that and I struggled and whatever. And most meetings that I've ever encountered are set up in a way that, it's a safe space, right? And so I'm going to share. They don't want crosstalk. Guys are not allowed to poke me in the belly. They're not allowed to call me out of my BS. They're not allowed to give me tough feedback because they want it to be a safe space. I understand that. I'm not going to diss on any meeting that can be helpful for people because there's different types of meetings. There's different strokes for different folks, right? I was a man that had spent years mastering the craft of manipulating and being a sociopath. The last thing I needed was a safe space. I didn't need freedom, right? I didn't need breathing room. I needed somebody to get in my face and be like, dude, you said this last week. You said this the week before. You're saying this now. this does not match up. What are you talking about? And that was just not allowed in most of these meetings, right? And so I met a man the winter of 2015, 2016. So I don't remember if it was the end of 15, the start of 16, but in that winter, I met a man at a Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christ-centered 12-step recovery group. And he's like, hey, I'm really glad you're here. We were the only two guys in that group of like 20 guys that said, I'm so-and-so, and I'm struggling with sexual addiction. He's like, I'm really glad you're here, but given your story, he's like, I think you might need something more. He goes, I needed something more than what this group can do. And he's like, there's this group called Prodigals in Anchorage. And we were, Wasilla, right? And he's like, you should come with me sometime. I'm like, it sounds like a lot of work. I don't want more work. I don't need more work. I was just completely delusional, right? And in my head, I was literally at this point, Stephan, where it's like, if I can just have less affairs, if I can just look at porn less, maybe the affairs can go away and I can only look at porn compulsively. Like those would have been huge wins for me in my mind, because there was no way all of this could get taken away. There was no way my life could get transformed. That I'd signed that off. And at one point I even told this man, his name is Rick. I said, Rick, could we maybe get together for coffee every now and again? Like, and we could talk about this stuff. And in my mind, that was like me taking a big leap and really put myself out there. It's like, I'm willing to try. And he looked at me dead in the eye. And this guy is one of the most loving, gracious, selfless people I've ever known. He's like a father to me. He's like a grandpa to my kids. He's my best friend outside of Carrie. He looked me in the eyes and he said, Logan, if you want to get together for coffee every now and again, I don't have time for you. And that was hurtful. Like, that was a punch in the gut. And nobody had ever talked to me like that before. And then he quickly followed it up and he was like, if you want to seriously work on this, I'll help you. I'll walk with you. But it's going to be hard freaking work and you're going to hate it. And it's going to be probably the hardest thing you've ever done. And those words were true. And I was mad at him sometimes. And I hated the work sometimes. But God used him to, and a lot of other men, to walk with me through a recovery program. It was about a 2-year program, basically voluntary house arrest. And all those things that I had before, my routines, my freedoms, my choices to just do what I wanted when I wanted, my whims, all that was gone. This was not a legal, house arrest. There was no judicial system at play here. This was me and Carrie, submitting our lives, really, in a way, to the program. Because if we wanted to go camping as a family, she could do what she wanted. If we were going to go camping as a family, I had to submit a petition asking permission to go on a camping trip. I had to write out a detailed safety plan, like 4 or 5 pages. Where are we going? When are we going? What's it going to look like? How am I going to maintain safety? How am I going to make my daily phone calls? How am I going to, stick to my boundaries? What's this going to look like? So she signed away a lot of freedom too during this period of time. And I'm rambling, but it's
no, you're not, because to just hear that shows that we are talking not just a quick fix, because we all want that. Come on, give me that pill, that magic, that suddenly everything changes. And I wake up tomorrow morning a very different man, and we're all dancing around the fire. Bullshit. Okay, so that doesn't work, number one. Number two is that there were people out there who knew exactly what you had been going through. Okay, because we all think that we are alone. We all think, oh no, no one could ever understand what I've been going through. No one could ever. And then suddenly there are these people turning up who are actually you can't bullshit a bullshitter. So they have been there, done that. So this is a beautiful story and a beautiful chance for you that suddenly manifested itself there. I mean, as you said, Alaska is not rather a big place. The chance that there are men there, right there, ready for you, and take you on, was probably not very great. I mean, you just won lotto there, man. With these guys.
I love that you said that, because I have literally made the statement, and this is not a statement that I would make to everyone in my life. because it could easily be taken wrong. But I said to one of the guys in the program one time, I was like, this might sound terrible, but I'm so thankful that this was my addiction. Because if it was any other addiction, I'm not saying that there aren't there are resources, but if it was any other addiction, like, I don't know what I would have found in terms of resources. And yet, yeah, like, you're absolutely right. I mean, Anchorage is, it's 250,000 people. There's plenty of people and resources, but it is still a very small population compared to, most major cities, right? Where I lived in Wasilla was, a tenth of that or an eighth of that. So the idea that, yeah, I was able to connect with, when I first went to a prodigals meeting, there were like 20 guys there, all, there for sexual addiction.
Wow.
And like half of those were guys who had similar stories to mine and had years of completely transformed living. These were guys that were, to talk with them, incredibly loving and gracious and just transparent and raw and authentic and healthy. And these guys had done all the things that I had done. Nobody had the exact same story, but we all had connective tissue, right? I didn't think that was possible. Again, I was just looking for a way to do less bad crap. I didn't think that there was a way to stop completely. And then another level beyond stopping completely would be, wait, like, actually having an incredible relationship with my wife again, actually being able to look my kids in the eye and be an authentic and intentional, loving dad. Like, there's no way I could have that. Actually enjoying life and being thankful that God created me, there's no way. I never fathomed that was possible. And to some extent, I didn't even feel those feelings until almost the end of my program, like a couple of years sober, before I actually started going, oh my goodness, like, I'm not going to go back. I could, but I don't have to. And that was a complete change in mindset, that I don't have to keep having affairs. I don't have to keep doing this crap. It's there if I want it. I could go back and, wake up that monster and feed it, but it would be up to me to do that. And like, that was an incredible realization for me, that you're right, took me a long time. It was not a switch that got flipped. It was, about 2 years.
Beautiful. Wow. When someone has been looking out for you, let it be the universe or any deity that you believe in, if there is a God, or whatever it is, someone was really out there to help you. And I think that is so hard for us when we're in active addiction, that you believe that you're alone, that you believe that there is no help out there. It's impossible. And there's so many lies that addiction tells us, and that mental health problems like depression, all these things, they lie to us. There's no help. You're a failure. You look at you, and you're bathed in those negative emotions. And to suddenly experience such a breakthrough, and they often come year 1, year 2, etc., down the line, that you experience that freedom of actually, look at me, and not in a chauvinistic look at me, but actually in the kind of, wow, okay, wow, I've been true to my girl now for X amount of time, and I feel good and I like it. Now that is a beautiful feeling, because many people will be able to deal with their addiction white knuckling it, as I call it. No, I gotta be fine. I'm gonna be absolutely fine. No, I will not look at this woman. I will not have a drink. Let me go to 3 other meetings today so that I really don't have another drink. Well, that's white knuckling it. But you are a very different man by that stage. Wow. Is there, wow, fuck. What would you say to your younger version? If I give you my time machine and you can go back to your younger version in the midst of this addiction, how would you try to convince this younger version? Or would you say you have to make these experiences to grow and to become the man who you really are? Or would you give your younger version an advice?
Right. So I've thought about this, and I mean, I don't have a perfect, concise, clean-cut answer, because there's basically two things. On one hand, and I'll look at it this way, you know, obviously I can't get in a time machine. So what would I say to someone like me, 10 years ago, 8 years ago? And I can feel better about that answer, because I know for sure what that would be, which is, however far it's gotten, don't let it get worse. Like, let this be your rock bottom. Because I can tell you what it will look like.
Nice.
Now, and the reason why it's not necessarily a clean-cut answer, and I think you know where I'm going to be going here, is if I were to say it to myself, there's a part of me that's like, man, I don't necessarily. Would I wish that all that pain could be removed from my wife? Of course. And yet, and I don't say this lightly, I wouldn't trade where we're at for just not having gone through a transformative journey. And of course that could be taken very wrong, right? But it's but that's the truth. Because what you just said, addiction is the opposite of addiction is connection, right? And the beautiful thing about recovery, we talk about this all the time, on our Monday night meetings, and I talk about with my boys and with family. And I got into recovery to stop cheating on my wife. I got into recovery to stop sexual addiction. I didn't get into recovery to work on my anger, which I deeply struggled with anger for years. And yet God gave me tools to work on my anger. I didn't get into recovery to find a replacement for my dad. God gave me that. I didn't get into recovery to find a best friend. But God gave me, after, he was my mentor first, and yet this man, Rick, has become, a best friend to me. I didn't get into recovery to get buddies that would help me fix my roof when it leaked this past winter. But, God's like, so all these things, and I didn't get into recovery because in my mind, I recognized on a deep level that I didn't know how to interact with life in a healthy way, but God gave me that. So like, I wouldn't trade that. And that's what recovery is it enables me to interact with life in a healthy way. And that's just not something that I knew how to do. Can I share this just really quickly with you real quick? So this is something, so again, I hope, any of my references to God and Christianity, I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to tell you what anyone should think. In my life, my experience, this is what it's looked like, right? So in my devotional the other day, I was reading this, and I love it because this is one of the perfect examples. Like, what I was reading was not meant to be recovery materials, but it speaks to recovery so awesomely. So it says, our instinct is to romantically consider innocence as man's perfect state. It's talking about the if anyone's familiar with the creation story, Adam and Eve, they get tempted by the snake, right? They get tempted and they fall, and now sin enters the world, right? And wish Adam would never have done what he did. But we fail to realize that redeemed man is greater than innocent man. We gain more in Jesus than we ever lost in Adam. God's perfect state for humans is one of redemption, not innocence. And I love that, because that's what recovery has been able to be for in my life. Is it's not that we have this innocent, perfect white picket fence life. It's like, no, we went through terrible, terrible, awful stuff. And because of that terrible, awful stuff, and because of the transformed work that's gone on in our lives and our relationship, there's so much appreciation for everything that we have. Because I know what it looks like to live in that dark place, and I don't ever want to be there again.
Beautifully said. 100% agree. And again, there is actually no easy answer. There are sometimes platitudes, there are sometimes cliches, but it is always a bit more nuanced. I sometimes wonder how my life would have been if I somehow would have been able to do all the work that I did over the last, say, what is it now? At least 10 years, if I could have done that as a younger man,
Right.
how would have my life ended? Or where would I be now? So I think that is the only thing that I sometimes wonder, but otherwise I 100% agree with what you are saying. Without us having gone through the darkness, we would not appreciate the light. I think that is such a key message. We wouldn't live as intentional, because for sure your role as a father has changed with the insights that you've gained. You just saying the word extreme ownership says so much about your integrity, says so much about the growth that you have gone through. And that's just beautiful. So therefore, like it or lump it, you have become a leader. You have become a person that others are looking up to, that hopefully includes your boys, where they can see humility, integrity, authenticity, all that in action playing out in front of them. They will probably not know it now, depending upon their age group. They might not realize the gift that you are giving them by transforming and by being this man who you are now. But I can guarantee you, down the line, they will remember a transformation.
Well, and that's something, just what you're speaking to there, as far as my boys and how they're growing up. That is just an additional thing that's like adding to this long list of like, got into recovery for this, God gave me all this. Another thing that has been given to me and my wife is, so my boys it's birthday season. So they're almost 12, almost 11, almost 10 and 8 years old. So they're, they're stair steppers right now, 11, 10, 9, 8. But so they'd all been conceived, they were all alive during my addiction. But some were raised, in an unhealthier lifestyle than others, to put it that way, right? But they're 4 kids inside of 5 years. So they've also all kind of had the same upbringing in a different way. They've all been able to grow up now over the last 8 years in a recovery household. Like, so we've never stopped going to our meetings. My wife and I now lead those respective meetings, because my mentor and his wife, who's my wife's mentor, they moved away a couple of years ago. So we took over, we lead those meetings. Our kids have gone to childcare ever since. And so like we call it Monday night church. We're going to our recovery meetings. We call it night church. And when they were little, they just, they're going to the church building where we go on Sunday mornings. That's all they knew. But as they've gotten older, it looks a little bit different for each kid, but at an appropriate level, we've shared our stories with our boys. They know the things that I've done. They know why we've gone to night church all these years. And it's not from this level of self-pity or, it's like an emotional manipulation. It's like, no, like we've gone for years because I had a lot of stuff I needed to work on. And that's what we've been doing. And now we go still to work on ourselves, but also to give back, right? And to help others. And so when we talk to our boys, recovery is just a part of our dialogue. It's just a part of our vocabulary. And it's like, that's something that I never would have, I wouldn't be able to have that. If addiction had never been part of my story, recovery wouldn't be part of my story. So I get to talk to my boys and use recovery tools and use recovery lingo and talk about these things with them.
Exactly.
And I'm so thankful for that. And it also takes away that stigma. Like they understand, so because one day they're going to have a friend, they're going to have, a friend's parent, right? Like, and they don't need to be looking at recovery as, you're one of those broken people. It's like, no. So you're a human. Got it. Okay. Because we're all humans and we could all use recovery, right? We've all got flaws and issues and struggles.
Shit, yeah.
But most of us will just never have a point that Logan had where he was about to lose his wife and kids. And I'm so thankful that I was at that point because, as we said earlier, if I wasn't facing that level of pain, then I would have never gone through that process.
Touché. And it is so important. I often made in the past comments about the fact that if I was in power of a country, I would make a month of rehab mandatory for every teenager, to expose them to some of the tools, to some of the insights, to practices that allow them to feel their emotions and to be with their emotions rather than running away from them, to dispel some of the bullshit, the myths and all that. So yes, so you're so right. And I'm so pleased that your boys will have that different vocabulary, also that you have modeled some of the different behaviors and coping mechanisms and
Right.
the reality of living life in a turbulent world where you're tempted to run away from your pain and try to escape your reality. Wow, well done. You're an amazing man, Logan. You're so open and transparent at a time still where people are using about 15 filters on their Instagram. Talk about white picket fence just version 5.0 by now, which is all on the internet, but it's still the same. There's still, we continue to hide. We continue to live an ever faster paced life and do not stop to actually see what is happening within us, to actually just rest for a moment and let those emotions come up and deal with those emotions and ask, what messages are these emotions really? What is my body, my soul, my spirit? What are they telling me? Okay, because these are all messages. And our brain, be it now on an emotional level or on a really factual level, it has all the answers. We just never stop to listen. We never stop to listen to the messages. And then only when we actually do stop and learn a bit more about us, and how we really work on the inside, that is when you allow change to begin to creep in. Because you need to realize first what is that there are some things happening. You need to be able to name them. Let that be fear, let that be anger in your case. I can very much subscribe to that. Anger and resentment were my key driving factors 10, 20 years ago. And it's just weird. There's so many things, but we never ever address them until you hit rock bottom. And I think, therefore, I agree with you. I'm grateful for rock bottom. And I love your message that rock bottom is good, but let that be your rock bottom. Don't let it go further down. That is a good message if I've heard one.
Because I do think there's this idea, like the idea of rock bottom can mean different things to different people. And some people look at it when they're through the recovery lens of like, well, what is a rock bottom a real thing? And like, some people don't necessarily have a rock bottom part of their story. And my opinion is, everyone that has experienced healing and sobriety, it may not be as tangible or as extreme of a rock bottom as some folks, but everyone can point to a rock bottom. It is the point at which I felt the most pain that was the most motivating. I mean, that's how I look at it. But if I heard about one guy that's like, oh, my rock bottom was I went to prison for 30 years and I lost my family. And if I think that, okay, well, that's rock bottom, I guess I haven't hit it yet. I guess I don't need recovery yet. And I really, like when I'm with my groups and stuff, I mean, I try to really dispel that myth, because it's like, no, rock bottom is a point in which I say, I'm feeling pain. This sucks. And I don't want to feel this anymore. So any moment in my addiction can be rock bottom if I choose, okay, I'm in a pit and I don't want to be in this pit anymore. And here's a guy or guys, reaching their hand down. Let me take their hand. Boom. That can be my rock bottom. It doesn't need to be, prison, losing my family, losing my job, ending up in a drunk tank. Like, it doesn't need to be that stuff.
Nice. But I mean, it's the same with trauma. Okay, it is or PTSD if you look at it. And for a long time, I didn't think that PTSD was much of an issue because I had beautifully, nicely disguised it and put a positive spin on it, nice abstract. And to a certain degree, I thought, well, those injuries that I had, it's neither here nor there. This was not, I was not blown up on a battlefield with my best friend dying with his guts on my face. So therefore, so my trauma can't be so bad. But trauma is so different and unique for each and every person. And so is recovery. And so is the rock bottom. So it's lovely that you actually individualize these kind of concepts. We should not compare ourselves with others too much. We should see the commonalities. We should see that there are so many common themes running through our lives as addicts or of people with who are going through mental health challenges. They're common themes, but it is no. Don't start a pissing contest with regards to your trauma or with regards to your rock bottom. That's neither helpful and if at all is counterproductive. I agree. Having said that, sometimes if you think, oh no one could have had it so bad as I have. Well, then that was my case. I needed that pissing contest where someone actually put me in my place and thought, yeah, come on. So it's okay in some circumstances, but ultimately this is your journey, and your journey, your life is worthwhile living. And I think it is many people, when they're in the darkness, they don't feel like that. Their pain appears to them so immense that often they are paralyzed, that they paralyzed by shame, guilt, but also by the immensity of the task ahead. What would you tell these people?
That there is a way out of that cave. I always liken it to a cave. For me, when I had gotten myself into this point of years of training myself to chase after addiction, it was as if I had walked into this deep, dark cave. And now, again, extreme ownership. I took the steps to get close to the cave. I took the steps into the cave. I took the steps deeper into the cave. I did take those steps and I'm responsible. And yet, that doesn't mean that I can't also be at a point where I'm going, oh crap, I don't know how to get out. Like both of those things are true. I chose to make my choices, and yet I also was powerless to just go, okay, I'm done now. And that can be really hard for somebody outside of recovery to understand. But I use that analogy because that's what it was for me. I was responsible for my choices, and I couldn't just stop, flip of a switch.
Beautiful.
So there is a way out of the cave, and as you put it, no matter what I've done, no matter how far I've gone, there are men that can help me. There are people that can help me. I mean, obviously, whether it's sexual addiction, I'm a male, I'm a female. There are people that can help me, but I got to start looking. I got to be open to it, and I got to want it.
Beautiful. Logan, you're an amazing man. I'm so grateful that you're doing the work you're doing, that you're breaking one of the last taboos as a man to talk openly about sexual addiction and about your insights that you had, your lessons that you had to learn a real hard way. But without those lessons you had to learn the hard way, you wouldn't be the man you are nowadays. The candle in the darkness, or probably for some people a torch, or even a light tower somewhere. And I think that is the most beautiful thing of recovery, that we're coming to a point where we say, well, okay, I've done all this work. Well, let's make sense of it. Let's leave a legacy, without that being now our self, again, creating a halo above us bullshit. No, we just say, I went through so much crap. What is the meaning of that? What is the sense of that? That is then when we start giving back, when we start being open and humble and open up about our journey so that others can follow us and maybe change the world by starting to change themselves. And I think that our world definitely needs it right now. And so the more we can actually spread those words, the more we can spread those words of hope, of the fact that the past does not equal the future. So this is absolutely so crucial, especially at this time in the of the current state of humanity. So yes, Logan, you're an amazing man. I'm very, very grateful that you were a guest on my show today. If people want to know more about you, if they want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
So right now, this is super, super grassroots in terms of me coming on and, shouting from the proverbial rooftops. So what I've got right now is an email. Make sure you can put in the show notes. It's prodigalsinfo@freakside.com, which is, goes straight to myself and my wife, Carrie. So if a man is struggling, wants to reach out, if a woman is struggling, wants to reach out, a spouse, that's something I didn't really dive into. But again, my wife, because of the trauma that she went through from my sexual betrayal and that abuse that I put her through, she got into recovery shortly after me, and she's never stopped. So she works with women who have been hurt by a man with sexual addiction, and I work with men. So if a man or a woman, is looking for resources, this is not what I do for a living. I don't have, books and courses that I'm here to sell, but I'm here to help. And so wonderful. If somebody wants to reach out, I am more than happy to talk to them. It's possible I can point them to a resource that's near them, depending on where they're at geographically. I can definitely recommend, some books and some things like instant courses and stuff. But again, if nothing else, I just, let me be one of the hands reaching down. So there's, like I said, I can make sure you have that email to put in the show notes and people can reach out.
Logan, thank you very much. And guys, look down there into the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast, because Logan's details are down there. So if the sheer fact that you're listening now after us having a beautiful 1 hour open discussion here means that probably this topic is getting quite close to you. So what have you got to lose, guys? Just go down there and hit the link and say hello. It takes you probably, a minute to quickly do all that, say hello and, hey, can we talk? And just send it. The moment you've written it, send it. Don't think, just send it. And this could have been the best investment of time that you have ever made in your life. So I think there is hope out there. And if Logan and me, two numbnuts, really can get their shit together, then I think, please, there is hope for you guys out there. So don't give up and just check out the resources that are available to you, and do that email if you want to talk about sexual addiction with Logan. Logan, you're an amazing man. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show.
Thank you so much for having me. I very much appreciate it.
And you guys out there, look after yourself. Bye.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.